Hello there, Commonwealth from here. Scarlet and Violet as the first open-world Pokemon titles are the greatest leap in the history of the franchise. At the same time, it is also the most divided and different dual Pokemon release to date, with focus on the past and future of Paldea, or if you prefer, Iberia condensed to non-linear open-world video game map, just like Hyrule was in Zelda Breath of the Wild in 2017. Up to its November 18 release, very little controversy has surfaced, which is positive, but since this is likely to be a very good and diverse game with very expressive non-random encounter Pokemon, I want to cover one thing before the release, a detail that drags this overall very promising experience a little bit down, namely the textures of the landscape surrounding us, which look, for the lack of a better word, outdated, especially when compared to other already released and upcoming Nintendo Switch games as of 2022. Well, that and the recently uploaded official live action trailer and commercials, which show the stark difference even more clearly than any of the other official trailers up to now. But why is this, and why does the most important game by far for Pokemon still have graphics that look completely dated to, say, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom? This is what we will talk about in our first video in the release month for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Graphics, and why this is the one thing that keeps this franchise from being compared to other AAA open-world game franchises. So be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell for more honest takes on this game. To get things out of the way, just like what was the case with Pokemon Legends Arceus, the release version of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet looks better than the February 2022 reveal trailer, with somewhat better texture work, color correction, vibrancy, contrasting, and so on. This is a given as the game wasn't fully developed 9 months ago. On top of that, unlike Legends and Sword and Shield, these two are open world games with far more technical struggles attached to their name. At the same time, these visuals don't exactly threaten other open world games already on the Switch, such as the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, The Witcher 3 or Switcher, and naturally The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And isn't even close to Tears of the Kingdom, which is pushing new boundaries on the system. At the same time, Zelda and many other Nintendo Switch games with big maps have a tradition, or at least multiple TV console titles in 3D before jumping to the open world. In other words, the franchises we are comparing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's graphics with had the necessary experience before delivering their 90+ rated Nintendo Switch releases. Many tend to forget, but Game Freak first made the 3D mainline Pokemon back in 2013 with Generation 6 and Pokemon X and Y. Then went on immediately to work on Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Moon before going in the span of 2 years from 240p handheld to mainline HD on a big screen, and 3 years after that turning that to open world, open air titles. The output of Pokemon games from Game Freak has been insane for any game studio, but it has also come at a cost. Since beginning with Generation 6, we have seen that the mainline Pokemon franchise has lost much of its original magic. The reason behind this decline in quality is simple. Game Freak has had to leap generations in graphics in just a few years, while still delivering a brand new Pokemon generation every 3 years. And even more Pokemon releases between these. Case in point, the release of Legends Arceus before Scarlet and Violet in 2022. 3 years, as we have seen in the case of Zelda, is absolutely not enough to deliver a new graphical revolution. Up to 6 years are often required. The open world Scarlet and Violet are coming out 3 years after Sword and Shield, and less than 10 months after Pokemon Legends Arceus, which was the big conclusion release of Pokemon's 25th anniversary. And because of this, graphical sacrifices are the highest on Game Freak's list to deliver a new Pokemon generation for the holidays. And this is the thing that is always overlooked when calling out Game Freak for the outdated engines, graphical detail, and lazy animations. The fact that they are developing and releasing games more often than any other studio publishing exclusively for Nintendo. We said this in the beginning of January, still unaware that by the end of the year we would play another new Pokemon game before exiting 2022, the first open world Pokemon game at that. Not only that, after this release and likely DLC/expansions, Game Freak will be back to work to deliver Generation 10 or X with its open world title by the end of 2025. Probably as one of the first big open world titles for Nintendo's next system, as there's no chance that the next open air Zelda after Tears of the Kingdom will be close to being ready at that point. 2029 at the earliest for that one. Despite this impossible development window, which gets more hectic and packed with other side projects like Arceus, Game Freak pushes for more impressive visuals in every new release. And that is the recipe for disaster. Visual, technical, but most of all in content and story. as Pokemon has since Black and White turned in my eyes into a below 80 to low 80 franchise, which sets money before quality in graphics, gameplay, and story. Luckily, Legends Arceus reversed this trend with solid gameplay, story, and post-game, and with the non-linear structure of Scarlet and Violet, it is clear that they are this time aiming to join the 90s club. After all, Pokemon is a franchise from the 90s. Joking aside, yes, there is a new gimmick in terrestrializing, but there is also a genuine commitment to at last surpass the games from Gen 1 to 5. Many still believe Pokemon peaked on the DS, and since then regressed until the graphical and story embarrassments that are Sword and Shield. Story and gameplay appear to have been addressed with this title, but some of the performance texture work and lack of detail issues are still there. The lack of optimization doesn't exactly help, especially in your promotion when you upload a choppy English overview trailer in contrast to a smooth Japanese version. Certainly not a confidence boost in Western markets when we witness constant pop-in and choppy frame rates. At least we know it isn't as big of an issue as seen here in the final release version of the game, but it is still a bad message to send out by yourself. Game Freak knows at this point that they are the laughingstock when it comes to visuals of Nintendo's biggest franchises. But the parent Pokemon company doesn't care as long as sales remain strong. They knew that they could get away long before the tree controversy in Sword and Shield. It goes without saying that lack of development time gets you a sloppy result. We saw this with Cyberpunk 2077 for its release in 2020, and Game Freak has up to now no non-linear open world experience. The fact that they decided to make the jump now when they have been delivering new games faster than ever before is mind-boggling. Not only that, they have expanded their virtual worlds with every new installment, from 2D to 3D, 3D to HD, and in 2022 from a linear, still often top-down map in Sword and Shield to open zones with full dual camera controls in Legends Arceus, and still in 2022, and non-linear completely seamless open world in Scarlet and Violet. A crazy development cycle, which ultimate price is a lesser graphical experience that feels off-putting to many, especially in Western markets where games are often measured by their benchmark graphics. However, this doesn't matter as the Pokemon Company's biggest country per capita is their homeland, Japan. And realistic graphics are simply less important there, where handhelds are king and the Switch dominates completely. Well, that and the love for anime art styles. In fact, without this market, the Switch would most likely next year face its successor. Why? As Nintendo is losing market shares when it comes to new sales compared to the PS5 and even Xbox Series S and X in the West. But instead, it seems that the successor will first come in say 2025, so in time for Pokemon Generation 10, or if you prefer, X. I'll repeat this again, since we'll not have time for it in our review of Scarlet and Violet. What matters to the Pokemon Company as a corporation are profits, and no individual market is more important than the Japanese one to them, where all the Pokemon centers and cafes are, and where they will host the 2023 Pokemon World Championships in Yokohama. New Pokemon games don't look great compared to other Nintendo releases, but there's a reason for it. It isn't a priority. If it was, then Game Freak and the Pokemon Company would have created bigger gaps than 3 years between each new Pokemon generation and mainline title. Since outdated landscape visuals 9 years after making the jump to 3D is not a sign of laziness, but greed of the parent Pokemon Company, which simply needs a new generation every 3 years. Why? In order to sell all new kinds of merchandise, naturally. That is the truth as to why the graphics still look like this. The games that created the global Pokemon phenomenon are used as a tool to bring new Pokemon and variations of existing ones to the table, and with it new anime seasons, plushies, figurines, cards and all other kinds of merchandise every 3 years. The weakness of this cycle is a development team that has less time to develop engines and graphical polish to catch up to the franchises we like to compare the 2022 Pokemon titles to. Scarlet and Violet's Paldea lacks the organic detail and approach found in the latest Zelda, and the low detail background textures are more visible than ever, now that the character models are closer to the modern new Pokemon Snap than Sword and Shield. In other words, the human characters and Pokemon models are up to date in 2022, but not the environments surrounding them. For this, we see clearly that the handheld past is still visible in Game Freak's new projects, and might still be there even with Generation X in 2025. The open world makes the low-poly landscape textures even more visible, even more so than it was in Legends Arceus with its open zones. But here's the twist, more visible for teenagers and adults like us, but not for children. You know, the main target group for the Pokemon Company. With that said, once you have gone open world, there's no going back. We've seen this for Zelda, and now Pokemon is about to join the fray. So who knows, perhaps in 2025 the landscapes, backgrounds, and also character models of the games will be combined closer to the look of new Pokemon Snap or Pokken with a 4K Nintendo system. Let's be honest, the one thing holding this franchise back the most are sadly the graphics. They're not appealing enough, and that is sad as this game with its vibrant and diverse non-linear world of running, climbing, gliding and battling deserved better visuals. The Switch is no doubt also to blame as open world titles struggle to maintain 30 frames per second on its current models, so Game Freak and the Pokemon Company are completely to blame either. Emphasis on completely though. And that is what we think of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's graphics, and with one concern before the November 18 release. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like it, as the more likes and views, the more Pokemon Scarlet and Violet videos we'll make this November. And to not miss any of these, be sure to press that subscribe button and notification bell. Last but definitely not least, a big shout out goes to all our patreon.com/Comeron patrons, and in particular our royal producer Charles Shash. You rock, and please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.